And I will announce the beginning of the call. It's Monday, January 23rd, or Tuesday, January 24th, depending on where you are in space and time at the moment. Could be something completely different if you're actually listening to this recording. But no matter where you are or when you are, I'm glad that you're here joining us. This is called the Open Hearted Practice Group. And I'm Jim Mansky, and Jory is right here in my heart today. She's upstairs resting. She had another grueling appointment at the dentist today. And so she's taking care of herself, resting this afternoon. And I'm going to fly solo. So we'll see. That's always interesting when I do everything by myself. It's a chance for me to make lots of mistakes. And so I'm looking forward to seeing what kind of mistakes I get to make today. If you're here for the very first time, then I want to let you know that this is a practice group based on nonviolent communication, a process created by Marshall Rosenberg. And we put the emphasis on practice. I've got a few different practices. I've actually got probably enough for 2 days planned today, so we might finish it up next week, because we're going to dive into issues around power today. And this is part of a series that we've been working on this year about relationships. And so we're going to talk about how to share power in relationships and what happens if we don't share our power in relationships. So that's the general topic. And we'll start in just a moment with a self-connection exercise. And then after the self-connection exercise, we'll break up into small groups. Break up sounds like such a harsh way of putting it. We divide. I don't know. We'll have to come up with a more nonviolent way of we'll propagate some small groups for you to hang out in and talk about how you are and your response to the self-connection exercise. Then we'll come back together again as a large group, chat for a few minutes, then we'll launch into some practices and some information about power from a nonviolent communications lens, at least my lens. It's not the nonviolent communication lens. Oh, I like join in small groups. Thanks, Leslie. That's a good way of putting it. I kind of like propagate too. I'm a gardener and I love the idea of propagating. So we'll either propagate or join or something else. Go into, yeah, I like that. Flow, I like that. Rena says we'll flow into small groups. Yeah, Rena, you're hired. I think you should be a certified trainer. Oh, gosh, that's right. Rena is a certified trainer. Congratulations to Rena, by the way. Rena became a certified trainer very recently after working on it for many, many years. And just congratulations to you, Rena, for meeting that goal that was so important to you. And I'm so glad to have you join us on our team of over 700 certified trainers, I think, something like that, around the world. I'm really glad to have you there in India and with your international presence as well. So
Thank you so much. Yeah, just lovely to celebrate here. It's my first time at this group, in this space, and I'd love to accompany any of you who'd like to, go move on in your certification journey. So thank you, Jim, for acknowledging. Yeah.
It's a pleasure. It was a real pleasure to assist you as your mentor and as your assessor during the last part of your journey. And I learned a lot, continue to learn a lot through this process. That's why I keep doing it. Really do enjoy it. All right, so let's start with a self-connection exercise. And this exercise will be just a chance for you to touch into your own direct experience right now and to just see what you learn about what it's like to be you in this moment. So just begin with right where you are. You're probably looking at a screen, or maybe a couple of folks are holding phones in their hand, or somehow they're with another device. Just be as completely present to what's actually happening right now. Awaken your skill of observing. And notice that you're breathing. Bring a quality of mindfulness to every breath that you take. And as you breathe, you might just notice how interconnected breathing is. Oops. Sorry. Uh-oh. I just accidentally put some people into small groups by pushing the wrong button and multitasking. But they'll all be back in 58 seconds. So just hang in there for just a second. Keep breathing. I'm going to keep breathing too. I think everybody's back now. So just continue to breathe and notice how you feel. As you tune into the body, notice first sensations that are present in your experience. And notice how these sensations are also part of the interconnectedness. As you breathe, you notice how interconnected your body is because your whole body is affected by the breath. Different parts of you move, your belly, your chest. Your breath is connected to your heart. And each breath brings with it a new wave of sensations that you can pay attention to. And then noticing the emotions that are arising in your experience right now. Emotions are and sensations are like a form of information. They're letting you know that something matters. What's important to you right now? This is a vital question, literally vital. It connects you to your vitality. What's the life that's moving in you right now? I'll make a few guesses about what might be for some of you. Maybe you're here for learning. Maybe you're here for community. Maybe it's about personal growth for you. Maybe it's about healing. Maybe it's about contribution. What's it about for you? Discover your own meaning. And as you discover the need that's most alive in you, the needs that are most alive in you, savor that energy. It's like a beloved divine connection, a beloved divine energy, Marshall Rosenberg called it, connecting you and interconnecting you to me, to the other 40 people in this call right now, to all the people that might be listening to the recording at some point, each of us all connected to other people, family, friends, colleagues, neighbors, and each of them connected to somebody else. An interweb of connection. Just breathe into that. That's what your needs are connecting you to, because we share these needs. We all need learning, growth, healing, love, community, connection, contribution. And finally, as the last step in this self-connection exercise, consider where's your power? The power to influence how you get your needs met today for the next hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes. What could you ask of yourself to increase the likelihood of you getting your needs met? This is where your power comes from, the power of a request. It's where the transformation starts to happen, when we make requests to enhance our lives and enhance the lives of others. So enjoy that power that you have. And in a minute, we'll flow to small groups. And in the small group, the invitation is to open your heart first, to get connected to why do you want to be in this small group? And how are you right now when it's your turn to talk? And what needs are you hoping to meet by being in the small group today? And then in the large group as well. Everybody have about 2 or 3 minutes, so it's not a lot of talking. So when you're done after a couple of minutes, then someone else takes a turn. All the groups, I think, are 3, might be one group of 2, 1 or 2 groups of 2. But you might find somebody suddenly arriving into your group if more people show up after you're in the small groups. And just take care of each other. Make sure that everybody gets a chance to both practice the honesty as well as the empathy. Honesty being the part where you're sharing your heart, and empathy being the part where you're listening with your heart. So we will return here in about 10 minutes, and I hope you enjoy connecting. Oops. Here we go. And I see you've all flown back. You flowed out and now you've flown back. We've grown a little bit since the small group started. We're at 48 of us now. And I feel really happy to see you all here and so curious about if there's anything that anybody would like to share about what transpired in your small group. So if anyone would like to share with a large group, you can raise your hand. And you do that if you're on Zoom on the computer by going down to the bottom of your screen where there's a little happy face. And if you click on that happy face, the little arrow next to the happy face, it opens up. If you click on the happy face, it opens up a little menu. And one of the menu items is raise hands, demonstrated by Juliana and Siva. So let's start with Siva and then listen to her and then Juliana. Go ahead, Siva.
I want you to know, Jim, you made a good joke. It was, you didn't mean to, but next time you could say the same thing and actually mean it. And that is, you said, we've grown. And I thought you were talking about me and my conversation partner. And I felt that we did grow in those few minutes, but you didn't really mean that. You meant that there's more people here, but now I'm giving you a double meaning.
Oh, I love double meanings. Thank you. I love double entendre, Siva. Thank you. I want to groan in pleasure when I hear that.
Okay.
Okay, well, we'll quit while we're ahead here. Juliana.
Yeah, so Jim, today I thought that you had said that we're going to talk about the power around agreements to create the glue. That's what you told us on the first day. And now you said shared power in relationships. So I'm just trying, I'm really curious and excited to go into this, how agreements and shared power are connected.
Yeah.
I just wanted to just share that. Yeah.
I'm glad.
Yeah.
I think it's probably optimal. It seems like the flow to me as I was thinking about the class today that we start with sharing power because it's hard to make agreements without sharing power. So I thought we would start by laying the foundation with power first. So we're going to get there. Today is like the foundation.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you. Because I'm because I'm just recognizing that there are so many differences, that each of us have our individual differences. Besides our shared values, we also have differences. So that's where, my hunger is coming from, how we can grow a relationship in spite of differences.
Yes.
Yeah.
How can we grow a relationship in spite of our differences? Love it. And somebody else want to share anything? Go ahead, David.
Hello, Jim. Thank you for the topic, and I really enjoyed. As far as when I got into my small group, what resonated with me was the first question: why do I want to be in a small group? And what needs was the second, and then how may I share and serve? So I like these questions because they help me to understand my motivations in relationship with other people. Do I want to be a power hungry tyrant sort of person, or do I want to open myself up to shared experience? In my spiritual tradition, we talk about having filters where exchange of life promoting and divine spark fanning sort of activities can take place. And my motivations, if they're impure, and I need to examine them often based on my behaviors and interactions with others. If they're impure, then my filter gets clogged,
Mm.
and there's a power imbalance and just a dysfunction that would detract from the divinity of the other person and my own. And it causes in myself a terrible amount of unrest when I find myself with illegitimate needs that I call wants that are going to feed the part of me that's, I call it the carnal part of me. I want the spirit part of me alive and growing. So I like the fact that motivations were examined in my experience through these questions. And thank you for letting me share.
You're very welcome, David. Glad you're here. Anybody else, or is that complete for y'all? Okay. We'll just take a moment right now and breathe. If it's helpful to close your eyes for just a second and mark this transition. We've been doing one thing and then we went to another, and now we're about to go to another. So just take a moment to be with you, to just be present with you for a moment. You can kind of do a mini version of that first self-connection exercise, just noticing what's alive in you. What are you observing, feeling, and needing right now? I'm going to share my screen with you, and we're going to talk a little bit about power. This is the little graphic that we started with a few weeks ago that shows these elements that we're going to be covering. First week we talked about the whole thing spells out I, giraffe, and the I. There's two different I's because we have two I's. It's our intention and our identity, who we are, and why we're doing what we do. And we frame that around a sense of gratitude. We did a gratitude practice in that first week. And last week, we focused on inner work as a way of gaining energy in order to sustain and help our relationships to thrive. That through our own inner work, our own self-responsibility, we can enhance the relationships we have, and we can make choices about the relationships that most serve us. This week, we're going to work on the R part, which is here labeled refusing submission. But it's about more than just submission. It's about both submission and domination. We're going to refuse both. We're going to do our best to decide from now on, I'm not going to live in a world of power over or power under. I'm not going to live in a world of domination or submission, even though I've been educated to think that this is the only world that's possible for me. I want to see if there's another way to be in the world. And rather than me telling you what it is, I'd like you to practice and see what you can discover about it. And we're going to first work on healing some of this education that we've had about domination. And so the first question is to think of a relationship that you're involved in where you sense you have power over another person. For example, it could be where you're the parent and the other person is the child. Maybe you're the adult child and you're working with an elder parent. Maybe it's a boss employee. Maybe it's teacher student. Some sort of asymmetrical power. Asymmetrical just means that one person has more power than the other. And the way that that shows up is one party can make a decision that affects the other, and the reverse is not necessarily true. So, for example, in an employee-employer relationship, if I'm the owner of the business, I have the power to hire and fire. The other person that becomes my employee can't fire me as his boss unless he quits. So it's an asymmetrical relationship. So think of a situation in your own life where you sense that you have power over the other person, and write down who that person is. You don't have to name names. You can just say adult child or employee or whatever. I'm going to say it again just for folks on the phone who can't see this. Think of a relationship where you sense you have power over the other person. And then write down a specific example of what the other person has to do. So for example, I've got some people coming tomorrow to help me work in the garden. And they have to do what I tell them to do. They have to work where I tell them to work. So if I point them in one particular direction, I expect that they will work in the area that I ask them to work in. And make a clear observation about behavior. What do they have to do? Well, it looks like most people finish writing, so we'll go to the next step. But if you want to keep working on the second step, that's also fine. Then consider what's important to you about this thing that you're telling the other person they have to do. In other words, what's your need? This might be a relatively new concept for some of you. So I'm going to put up a needs list. This is a list of some needs that all human beings have. certainly not the only list of needs, and not the only, there may be needs that are important to you that are not on this list, just in case it would be
Jim, can I
supported.
just clarify?
Sure.
Oh,
Go ahead.
are you saying dig down to what my need that I'm trying to get met through making the other person do what I want them to do? Is that what you mean?
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Okay.
Like in
Mm.
my case, when I want the gardener to work on one particular area of the yard, it has to do with my need for order, because I have kind of a plan in mind, and it has to do with a need for cooperation and support. So order, cooperation, and support are the needs that are alive in me. What is it about for you? Sometimes you might notice a voice in your head that reminds you of something you might have heard in your own childhood. Like, I remember my mom or my dad telling me I had to do something like clean my room. And I was already a giraffe, I guess, because I would say, why? Why do I have to clean my room? But they wouldn't tell me what their needs were. They would say, because I told you so. And so see if you can get underneath and find out what the because really is for you. Not just because you have power over, but because something else matters. What matters to you? And if you come up with something that doesn't quite feel like a need to you in terms of how it resonates in your heart, you could just say, and if I had that, what would that give me? So, for example, if I had the thought, my gardener should do what I asked him to do because I'm the boss. Well, if they understood that I was the boss, what would that mean? And I sit with that question for a second. It would mean that there was some kind of mutual understanding of the vision that I have for the yard and the priorities of things. And if they had that understanding, what would that mean? Then I end up right back at support, cooperation, and order. So I call it the if-then transformation. If they give you this, and it ends up being a strategy, what need does that contribute to? What's the gift for you? When you find the need or needs, just sit with them for a minute. Do that savoring. Touch into the divine energy, the connective energy of the need. If you have the need, so does the other person. So see if you can tap into the connection at the need level between you and the other person. If I have a need for order, so does my gardener. If I have a need for support, cooperation, so does my gardener. I want to live in that energy of shared needs. sometimes that's enough to do the transformation, but we're going to keep on going, assuming that you're not totally connected yet, just so you have other steps that are available in case you need them for your relationship. So what happens if the other person does not comply with what you tell them to do? What's the consequence, either for you or for the other person, if they don't comply with what you tell them to do? So in my case, the honest truth is, if I hire a gardener and they don't comply with my requests, I'll fire them, right? I'll just find another gardener. So it's a pretty heavy duty threat that I'm holding over my gardener if I'm living in the old paradigm of power over. So in your case, what happens if the other person does not comply with what you tell them to do? And when you're ready, go on to the next question, which is, what do you imagine the other person feels if you enforce compliance, if you make them do it? How do you imagine the other person feels? What do you imagine the sensations and emotions that are going on in the other person? And then follow those needs, those feelings, to needs. What needs do you guess are alive in the other person? So for example, if I told the gardener, like let's say I told him to work on one area of the yard, and then I noticed that he was working somewhere else, and I came over and I says, "What are you doing, man? I told you that you were supposed to work over there. Do you want me to fire you?" I just imagine that if I were in the position of the gardener, I would feel scared or angry if my boss talked to me that way. And behind the fear would be around protecting my job, protecting my source of income, protecting the source of meaning that my job gives me. What do you imagine it's about in your situation with the other person? This, of course, is what we call empathy. We're making a guess about the experience of the other person based on our own experience in similar situations. It's a way to deepen the sense of connection with the other person, because we've all been on the other end of power over. We know what it's like to be angry or scared, or whatever the feeling is in that situation. So it's a way of having an even deeper sense of connection with the other person. And finally, for this round of practice, what do you sense as the effect of this power over behavior? And I'm talking on whatever level you would like to. You could talk about How does this affect you when you come from power over? What do you notice in your own body? What does it do in the body? What's the impact or the effect for the other person? And what's the relational effect of power over?
Jim,
Yeah,
it's Marta. Could you give an example? What is a relational effect? What does that mean?
sure. So
Please.
let's say that let's say that I'm a parent and I have a kid that is let's say they're about 10 years old, and I think as the dad that they should do the dishes tonight. That it's their turn. We have a list of chores in the house and they have to do the dishes. And if they don't comply, then I'm bigger than the child is. So I pick the child up and I put them at the sink and I stand behind them and kind of lock them into position between, so that the only place they can move is they can move their hands and wash the dishes. They could try to squirm away, but I'm bigger and stronger and I can force them to be there. What's the likely effect that behavior of mine is going to have on my relationship with my little girl? I can tell you because this is a true story. I went to some parenting course or something when my kids long before NVC, and this was a time in the 80s or maybe it's the early 90s when authority was very scared of parents being too permissive with their children, and you shouldn't let them get away with that kind of stuff. So if you have a rule, you have to enforce it. And so I actually tried this with my daughter. Some of you know her, Jaya. She survived, but it was not a great effect. It took a while for me to heal that. I felt so terrible about it. It was so out of integrity with how I wanted to be as a parent. I threw the book away after that experience. I was not willing to be a parent like that, a power over parent. And my guess is for my daughter in that moment, it was stressful, unnecessarily stressful. I would certainly have a do-over, a different way of handling it now than when I did then. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome, Marta. So, any other questions come up before you go back to small groups and talk about what you learned through this practice?
Oh, can I
Please.
speak? I don't know if I needed to raise the yellow hand. I just
No, go ahead. Go ahead,
something. In some of my examples for myself, some of the imbalance happens because there is a natural authority. So what I've picked up in the consequences of my behavior and the negative feelings I might experience, I just suddenly clicked onto this thing that they might also be wanting cooperation, acknowledgement, and trust that what they bring to the table is of value, rather than me providing all the answers or leaning into my prior knowledge or my expertise. And then I just don't know how I would reconcile that when there is, so what you were saying with a parent-child, I would say 90% of the time there is an idea that you could have cooperation or something, but there are a few times when someone's kind of natural authority or natural expertise kind of needs to take precedence.
Mhm.
And so I'm confused about that, because I would delight in having more cooperation and trust between people, but then there are times when I'm aware I don't lean on my authority at times, and that actually causes more trouble than it's worth,
Yeah. Yeah. So
because people
you're,
get confused about where they stand.
yes. So you're kind of pointing out the tension. If I'm catching you, you're pointing out
Mm,
the tension between a kind of a natural hierarchy, which exists between a parent and a
mm,
child, and in many other cases, and that you can see that you could go in a particular direction in that relationship where you became really permissive. And you can see that that's just dangerous. You can see the
yeah.
potential dangers. So the outside the box example would be the you're hanging out with your 4-year-old, and your 4-year-old opens up the they figure out, 4-year-olds are so clever, they figure out how to undo that little latch that keeps the cabinet closed underneath your kitchen sink. And you got your back to them, and then you turn around and you see that they're actually now in underneath the sink, and they're about to pour some kind of bleach into their mouth or something like that, right? And so the permissive parent
Mm,
would say, okay, well, the kid's going to find out what happens if they drink bleach. Well, that's crazy, right?
mm,
So then there's
mm,
something called the protective use of force, which is a way of expressing a natural hierarchy, like you're talking about, where
mm,
the parent
mm,
has more wisdom that goes along with the power. And so if there's a threat, an imminent threat of bodily harm or rights, then the person with the natural hierarchical power then exerts that power in the service of protection, but not in the service of punishment. I'm not spanking the kid
mm,
for drinking the bleach. I'm
mm,
not scolding them and trying to make them bad. I'm just taking the bleach away, and then we connect. Then we talk about, you know what? I really regret turning my back and not installing the lock in the proper way, because I really want to protect you. I got really, really scared
mm,
when I saw that bleach in your hand. And so that's why I
mm,
grabbed it away from you. And I want you to know that's not how I want
mm,
to be with you. I want to have a relationship where we're more cooperative with each other, where I protect you and you protect me. How's that for you to hear? And do it in language that's appropriate for a 4-year-old, of course. But that's what I'm trying to get
mm.
across. And then we have a chance to talk about it. Does that make sense, Elizabeth?
Yeah, there's like that end, which is like the 5% of life end. It's like the emergency, got to do it because it's just got to be done. And then there's like the 90% end, which is like freedom, autonomy, trust, cooperation. And then there's this little in-betweeny bit, which is like like the example with your daughter with the dishes. Like, you could work towards a more cooperative understanding, or get to the point in the evening when a kid isn't so exhausted that they have no more energy left to do the cooperative family behavior. But then there's this other bit where it's like, if that's gone on for months and months and months, and you can see that your kid is getting into a habit of being disrespectful or like being resentful or kind of playing a game around it, you can see that you're allowing space for a kind of bad habit to set in, or for them not to be considering the impact of their actions. There's like a little bit in there that's like bordering onto the kind of, this really needs to be taken into hand, but also how do I continue to work with this other person's autonomy? Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I
The
do.
example I think of was more in a workplace situation. So there's a kind of only a certain amount of openness that some colleagues have to being held accountable, or yeah, I don't know, maybe this is too much of a complex question for this kind
It's a
of group
very,
space, but
I think there's a lot of layers here. And what I would say is,
mm,
um, let's say I can imagine a situation like, let's go back to my daughter. If this happened after I was already in
mm,
as a trainer, and then I kind of woke up to what I just did, and then
mm,
I would mourn. Right.
mm,
I would probably first mourn with myself. Maybe I would get empathy from you or Rena or
mm,
Frankie or somebody else. And I would say, I tell them what happened and how I felt about it and what was going on for me. And I'd get
mm,
some empathy about what it was like, so I could recharge my battery. So I wasn't making myself wrong
Okay.
anymore, but I could see that I acted in a way that was
Okay.
outside of my integrity. And then I could approach
Mm,
the child, and then we could have a conversation. And I would probably start that conversation with listening. And I would probably just start with the observation. I says, "You remember last night when I stood behind you and made you wash the dishes?" And they say, "Yeah, I remember." And I said, "Well, what was that like for you?" And then I
mm,
listen and I reflect and I connect to their needs. And I just totally,
mhm,
as much as possible, I stay with their needs. And then I mourn out loud to them. I have such regret for my behavior. I would really like to find a way to get the dishes done without violence. And
mm,
either yours or mine. Do you have any ideas? And then see if I can use this thing that happened as an opportunity to connect and collaborate.
mm.
Does that make sense?
Nice. Thank you. That does really, really help
You're welcome.
answer some long questions that I'd lost track of. Thank you.
You're
Yeah.
welcome. And I put the slide back up because somebody asked me in the chat to put it up. That's why it's still there. Go ahead, Jody.
Hi, Jim.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Hi. How are you? It's good to see you.
likewise.
I really, this topic was really big for me. I want to say one thing and then I want to ask something. So, the reason why it was so important for me is I felt like I've, I can't, I can't really relate to this half of it. What I really can relate to is power struggles with people having power over me and being in abusive relationships. Not that I need to go into that, but the point being is that I was sitting here going, well, okay, I'm just saying that's what I'm more used to. I know we'll probably get to that. But the thing is the last gal was talking about something that is kind of important for me, job wise. I mean, I don't have, it's not like a big job thing, but it kind of is. So, and I'm kind of trying to sort it out separately than relation, which is kind of more on the other side of it. But so I am a teacher, PE teacher, but separate from that, I'm a referee. And so I used refereeing as a as a soccer. I'm a soccer and volleyball referee, but mostly soccer. And I was using this, and I thought, I'm not. I really want to learn this, but I am kind of having a little bit of a struggle, sort of like she was, because as a teacher too, a lot of my, and especially as a referee, I wrote it down. A lot of my things is, respect, safety. I mean, I got to keep these people safe, right?
Sure, sure.
And justice, and that they can play. And so a lot of times I have to do things that I don't want to do. It's very hard for me to actually be a rep because I'm actually a very sensitive, soft kind of person.
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of curious too, like what you were talking to her about. Like, I want to figure this out in a job wise too. Like, how do you keep strong? I obviously have massive rules. I have to.
Yeah.
But then
Yeah.
how do I do it in a spirit that's, I mean, I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there, like a teacher and rep. It's just kind of a weird, I know, thing, but
No, it's
it's
perfect. It's,
important.
it's actually a perfect example, Jody. And I don't know if I'm going to be speaking NBC dogma here, but I'll tell you my own experience and how it lives in me. And I ask people not to believe anything that I say, including what's about to come out of my mouth, because I want you to live from your own experience and not mine. But if I'm the referee of a game, then there's a natural hierarchy that exists in that game. And everybody who plays the game has agreed to live with the natural hierarchy. And the natural hierarchy includes that we're going to play by a certain set of rules that hopefully the coaches have trained the children or whoever to follow these rules.
Hopefully.
Yeah,
Like never, but
hopefully,
yeah.
right? And so that's there's some cooperation required there in terms of how they're coached and the educational process. And then one of the rules is that the referee interprets the rules, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah, that's actually how to say it.
yeah, and so you, for the purposes of the game, You have the institutional authority, we'll call it. But you can still do that with love. Like you say, you're a soft person. You're not doing it from punishment. You're not telling this kid, you're not giving, let's say you're a soccer coach and you have to give a yellow card. You're giving the
Yeah.
yellow card out of the service of protection and cooperation, not to punish the other kid. If you have a resentment to, you go onto the field as the ref and you see that kid over there, whoever that kid is, and because you remember him from previous games, and you have the thought, some kind of jackal thought of a judgment, and then you start trying to figure out how to give that kid a red card to get him out of the game. Well, then I would really get some empathy about that, because then you've moved from protection to punishment. And only you, as the referee or the parent or the boss, only you know what's alive in you. Only you know your consciousness. We can't tell from the outside. So that's what comes up for me, is to respect.
What did you say? Like, if I ever had to give a yellow card, you said it was out of service. What'd you say? Out of service and protection?
Out of
Is that what you
service,
said?
out of the service of protection and cooperation.
Out of service of protection and cooperation.
Yeah,
As opposed to punishment.
right.
I don't think about it as punishment. I mean, as a teacher too, I've been a teacher all my life, and being a PE teacher is a little bit different and harder because you have so many, safety issues and boundaries. But I kind of hear what you're saying, and I kind of like it. What I will say is I do have chronic players, actually women, not kids, chronic women who are always hurting other people. I mean, badly.
Yeah.
And it's become a big issue, and I have to really think about this. So I'm not trying to punish them, but I got to tell you, it's hard on everybody when I, like that lady was saying, if I allow and become, what do you call that? Like allowing for this behavior, guess who gets in trouble?
Yeah,
I do,
of course.
because everything starts to fall apart.
Yes.
So I've been trying to sort this out. How can I move? So what you're saying is stay in this kind of protection, not punishment. And I've never thought about it as punishment, although other people do.
Sure.
But I kind of, I mean, you're kind of saying that there's a hierarchy, got it. But I don't want to be that person that allows crap.
Yeah, you want to be the person that enforces the rules out of the joy of being able to make a safe place to play the game, right? And now
Enforces
you're also
out of safe place.
Yeah, you're also pointing out. First, I want to just acknowledge what Sudha wrote in the chat. Hierarchy is natural. Domination is a choice, and that's totally in harmony with how I would see it. That we're actually educated to become dominators. And dominators, when I say dominators, I mean punishers in this case. Dominators are punishers. That we're enforcing through punishment to try to make the world the way we want it to be. We're using authoritarianism. But you're also pointing, Jody, to some systemic problems that especially teachers confront every single day, in that the system is not designed for connection. The system is actually designed for obedience to authority. And so you're already playing with a stacked deck, unless you're in a really innovative school like a Montessori school or a new school or a school or something.
Actually, it's really interesting that you say that. I don't want to take up too much time, but I do want to say one thing. It's really interesting that you say that, because I spent 10 years at a private school with gifted children, and it was all based on cooperation. We had the 3 R's: rights, respect, responsibility. And I was trained to help them. I was doing MVC before I even met you guys, way before, 10 years before, because of this school. I say that because when I go into schools now and sub in Santa Barbara, I'm like, oh my God, it is so punishment driven. They're like, when I say, oh, hey, tell Sally what you didn't like about that. What did you not like? And the other teachers look at me and they're like, what are you doing? I mean, it's kind of getting into a different structure. I'm like, what do you mean? What am I doing? Because these kids I'm trying to help people to work it out, but they're busy punish, 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 punish. And you're absolutely right. And it's like, whoa, how do you work within that? Yeah. And I'm trying to
Yeah.
still be me, but you gave me some things to think about, but it's absolutely true.
You're welcome. Yes, and you know, we're sometimes all that's left for all of us in this situation that we're in is mourning, because mourning will give us the power then to start exerting the political will to change the system so it meets more needs with less cost. But it's not an overnight thing, right? It's going to take time, energy, love, and lots and lots of resources to begin to change these systems. That
And I think that's really important, Jim. I've been sitting here so thinking, you remember how you talked about, and I can bring it up because I think people can relate to it. You know, as a referee, a lot of us quit, and a lot of my friends have quit because parents yell at us, and I mean scream at us, and so do coaches, and so do players. And I think they're not buying into that cooperation model. You know, they just see us as people making bad calls or wrong calls or whatever, and then we're punished
yeah,
in turn
yeah,
from them. And so one of my bigger questions, which we might get to, is how do I create this cooperation with not just the players? Let me tell you, in fact, most of the time it's not with them at all. It's with these parents, or it's with these coaches. I mean, so I'm kind of curious what you think about that, because I feel like I'm way stacked.
yeah. Sounds really lonely, Jody. Sounds really lonely sometimes, and I imagine that where the power comes from is shared power. And so I'm hopeful that as you continue to study and work with NBC and do the necessary mourning that's required when we're working in these kinds of systems, that will unlock the creativity to transform systems into life-serving systems. And it comes through connection and collaboration. It doesn't come with power over. It comes with power with. That's where we're winding towards.
So it's kind of important, I think, to say things like that, like, hey, you know
Yes.
what? We're together to support these kids or whatever, so that, it's like, what? I think we both care about safety. So
Yeah.
let's see what I mean, I'm learning this from you, but I'm trying to, it is in a very rough, tough environment at times. I think things like this would really help. I just don't know how to do it when I'm up against a lot of anger,
Yeah.
but I kind of know what you're so shared power is kind of a key, period.
Power is a key. Shared power in mourning.
There.
Yeah.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Jody. Go ahead, Sarah Joy, and then we'll finish with Siva and go into the small groups. Go ahead, Sarah Joy.
Thank you, Jim. I was going to be talking about like a 10-year-old son, but it's with a playmate. And over at my house, out in the garden, and I have one tree that's a very small but sturdy plum tree. They wanted to climb trees and make a fort and spy on everybody in the neighborhood and all that. And I was totally fine with that, but then found out that his friend wanted to climb on bushes that weren't sturdy, that they could both fall easily off. The branches were very, skinny and not sturdy and moving around. And I tried to draw the line there. And I got a lot of rebelliousness and anger because the other boy did it at his house. He was allowed to do whatever he wanted. And maybe their bushes were 20 years older than mine and really trees, I don't know. But, this was not safe at my house. And I tried to say it. And my son is like now 30 and still remembers that incident where he felt that lost a playmate for him because they didn't have the freedom to play independently, and there wasn't the understanding that it was safety for both of them and also to protect the bushes.
Yeah.
And so I like the idea of speaking individually, to the kid, and how does that make you feel or whatever. But like when you have like the two groups, like the referee situation, you have parents and you have kids, maybe they have different values. Like maybe the parents want to win at all costs their kids, so they're willing to, look the other way when their kid, isn't the one that get injured or whatever. but but it sounds like to me, like from being a teacher and having talked to students, that they actually want things to be fair. Like my son once told me when he was in middle school, he was upset because the principal had a rule, don't run in the hall. And then he'd be standing there in the hall and letting kids run by and not say anything. He goes, that's not fair. He's not, punishing them or telling them to stop or whatever. So, if you'd set these kids down in the soccer field, or, my son and other kids, and discussed the bushes or protection, or discussed, what do you think are fair and safe rules, they would come up with better ones than the adults, I think. And I really think that if, and then maybe they could be shared with the adults.
Yeah.
I am mourning because I feel blamed, and I feel that my son doesn't trust my decisions, or doesn't think I'm caring or loving, or maybe thinks I'm power over, for that one incident, and maybe one other later on about vaccinations. And I won't go into any more details, but I would, just be curious what you think my strategy should be, because it's many years later. He's willing to go to counseling, actually, but I just wanted to be able to talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes sense to me that finding ways to talk about it matter. I like what you said about empowering other partners, whether they're children or colleagues or co-workers or neighbors, whoever, finding a way to share power and collaborate to discover the agreements. So we're going to work on agreements within the next week or two, and talk about how to negotiate using nonviolent communication and negotiate agreements to try that work for everybody, and so that's definitely on the agenda, Sarah Joy.
Do I have a right as a parent and an owner of my house to make, these are the agreements if you're going to come over here and play, that, I'm in charge of everyone's safety, and what if you fell out of the bush? I would be responsible to your parents. I'd be liable.
Yeah.
If you fell out of the bush instead of being in a.
It
I don't know.
it makes sense to me, Sarah Joy. I mean, for me, and again, I'm not speaking on behalf of everybody in the universe or anything, but for me, there's a difference between authoritarianism and authority. So one of the key distinctions that we talk about in NVC with candidates and with other students is the distinction between obedience to authority and respect for authority. And so when it's an obedient authoritarian system, what happens if I don't obey authority is I get punished. And in an authority-based system that's not authoritarian, what happens is there's some other kind of a consequence. Like maybe you don't get to play at our house unless you agree to these rules. Like in Hawaii, for example, everybody takes their shoes off before we go into the house. It's like a cultural norm. So if somebody comes walking into our house with their shoes on, I don't go off on them like an authoritarian and say, are you some kind of cultural idiot? We take our shoes off in Hawaii. And that would be a real punitive way to handle it. Whether I'd say, oh, wow, I see you still have your shoes on. And I'm curious, do you have something going on with your feet that means that you should keep your shoes on to protect yourself? No, not really. Okay, well, so in Hawaii, you may not know this, but we tend to take our shoes off because we really value, we don't want to bring in all the kind of strange tropical microorganisms that are outdoors. And so we tend to leave our shoes outside. Would that work for you? And so you can use NVC to work with authority without becoming an authoritarian. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Yeah. Siva, go ahead. Whoops, your mouth is moving, but I can't hear you. Whoops, still not unmuted. There you go.
Okay.
There you go.
I'm really glad that Jody brought forth these really practical questions that I really relate to, both as a teacher and a parent. So I'm just curious, Jody, if it would possibly work to say, to introduce you to the community where you're going to be refereeing and saying, I'm here because I'm concerned for safety. And I'm wondering if all of you that I'll be refereeing and the parents and so on, do you have that concern or not? Otherwise, I'm not your person.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's the kind of thing you could do in a meeting, you know, to have like a pregame meeting or some kind of club meeting where you hash it out before the season begins and stuff like that. I'm getting some messages on the chat that some people are not able to hear. So if you can hear me, raise your hand or somehow go like this if you can hear me. Okay. Okay. So it's on your end probably, and so. Yeah, so now I see Sudha can hear again. Great. All right. So we'll carry on. Let's see what happens if we go
Yeah,
to
no, I like that. Thank
Yeah.
you. I like that from both
Yeah.
of you. And we do try to have talks like that, but I will say that it doesn't always work. But actually, I do see what you're saying, and I can appreciate that. It just takes some work.
Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
work. Nonviolence is hard work. It's really,
Yeah,
if you want
it
efficiency,
is.
just become authoritarian and kill people that don't obey. You'll have a very efficient,
Right.
short-lived society.
Right.
Okay, so let's go to small groups for 12 minutes and connect with each other. So you're not just listening to a few of us, but everybody has a chance to talk. And the idea is to kind of review what came up for you in the exercise in terms of any insights that you got and any clarity that you got and any questions that remain. It's a chance to practice honesty, chance to just share what's in your heart, and also empathy, to just be present with other people no matter what they say and how they say it. So no need to try to convince anybody or correct anybody. Just be present with people and see what you learn from each other. And we'll be back here in 12 minutes. And I might have to make some new groups for people because new people have arrived. So here we go.
Okay.
Okay. Any reflections that anyone would like to make about what you're taking away from the small group experience? What did you learn? Yeah, Sue.
So I appreciate that opportunity, and I really appreciate my cohorts they were very willing to give feedback, because I felt a lot of grieving. I felt a lot of grieving for what Jody had to say, and it took me all the way down. It took me, I've been grouchy with some people lately, wanting to scold, because I don't like what I perceived was a lack of professionalism, or making it easy for me to pay people to get my gym thing or get the plumber here. And I've been nasty. I don't know why. For a couple of days, I've just been really curt, unusually. And I think it became because sometimes I get out of balance and I'm a doormat. And so I'm really not very mature in this. But on a deep level, like as Jody was saying this, I felt so, I mean, even as a coach, I felt her entangled between all the factions and then these people that are quitting. And as you guys spoke, though, I saw the still point. I saw a moment of presence that I see has been trying to come through me. Is if I'm present, I may be able to share, or I may be able to, and you're teaching us, it's about what's everybody's needs. And I may be able to share and still talk about my need without what's the word, scolding people.
Yeah.
And I had a really deep grief for a moment, because for a moment I saw what cops are up against. Just for a moment. I mean, they've got the most extreme of both. That they want to be seen as some trust, and yet they're in fear, and yet they're in fear of their own life all the time too.
Hmm.
And for a moment I felt that whole I felt that whole I don't know what, that amount of stress
Yeah.
that's when things happen. It's tragic,
Yeah.
you know, and when they're blamed, or when they make a mistake, or when they're dominating, and we haven't been able to really discuss that as a country very well yet.
Yeah.
I mean, some people are. There are some people, you see these little pockets, but how it's portrayed in the media, it's people that are most scolding,
Yeah.
seem to get the most projected.
Yeah.
So just thank you for that. It just hits me on so many levels.
Yeah. Yeah. Just to catch how overwhelming it can be for you and for all of us to actually pay the price of our submission. That sometimes then it leaks out as anger or scolding or other things like that, and also it can leak out as scolding ourselves, making ourselves wrong. So it's a consequence of this systemic submission and domination that we've all been suffering from. Our family, Jaya, Jory, and I are all reading a book right now together. We're actually listening to it because we're too lazy to read, but we are listening when we're in the car together to Gabor Mate's book, The Myth of Normal, where he talks about the consequences of living in a society that we have inherited that is full of domination and the inevitable trauma that and stress that comes from domination, and how it can leak out, not only behaviorally, like you're talking about, with uncharacteristic scolding and things that are out of integrity, making your kid do the dishes like I did that time, and so forth, and how we really need tons and tons of empathy to transform that grieving and that mourning in us, so that we can show up with more integrity and more connection and more collaboration, like you're aiming towards, Sue. So thank you for bringing that up. Joya, and then David.
Hi, Jim. I was with Isa in the breakout room, and we had a kind of a similar situation. And before I went into the breakout room, I was thinking of how I take care of two parents. One is 87 and one is 84, and how habitually I break into a kind of a domination, which in my head is about protection. And I am like taking care of them. So I have to tell them, don't do this, do that, take this medicine on time. And I notice the kind of tone I have in the tone with which I speak is of domination. And then it so happened that my 27-year-old daughter came to stay with me, and I have just turned diabetic. So she took away the sweet box from me and said the same thing in that same voice. And I didn't like it. And I was like, I don't like that voice. I mean, that is not protection, that is domination. And I was like thinking, oh, I do this every day to my parents. And Isa shared something so beautiful. A story was so beautiful. And a quote that she read on the chat, which said about authority being somebody who's authoring something. And she said, you know what, with my parents, I'm authoring the last chapters of their life. And so I'm open to help them author their last chapters with their life of their life in the most beautiful way. And that expanded me, just listening to her and the way she said about this, how this expansion has made her creative, and how she is going around choosing creative options of keeping everybody happy. That made me so joyful. And I think it transmitted, and I couldn't even see her. Her room was dark. But thank you, Isa. I mean, it's just such a joyful moment.
Thank you for sharing
that
that
moment of learning.
inspiration. Thank you so much, Isa and Joya. I love that reframe from that we are authors. Authoring is such a creative process, and whenever we get stuck in our own domination programming, our own submission programming. It's just a momentary creativity crisis. It's just a signal that we need empathy. I say just, but it's like the most important thing. We need empathy in those moments when we catch ourselves, so that we don't then become the inner scold, like, Jaya, you shouldn't talk to your parents that way, but rather to notice it and to mourn it, to mourn that you're not showing up, that you want to author a new story in the last chapter of your parents' life. Very, very touching. Thank you so much for sharing it, Joya. David, and then Zohar.
Hello, thank you for letting me share again. One thing I learned, I really grabbed out of this, and I really like the fact that it captured my attention right away, was the number 3 question: what's important to me in my role as a power broker, or the person in power? And my immediate impulse was to label or judge. I had prefabricated a label. I put pure or impure. Am I going to be honest with my power? Am I going to be impure and have an underlying agenda? So I know that in myself, with relationship to my own being and that of others, is that I'm prone to immediately and impulsively almost, okay, let's slap a label right away. There's 2 labels or 3 labels that are possibilities here. And so I caught myself, and I appreciate that about this exercise, is that I learned that. And I also liked, with respect to the coaching and refereeing piece, the good of the collective whole. And each person is like a cog in the wheel, and if the gears don't mesh, we got chaos. So that piece about being a person in authority that can make sure the rules and whatnot are followed is so important to the collective good. And I appreciate that from, I believe it was Jody. So thank you, and I'll pass.
Thank you, David. Thank you. And I noticed that some people are saying in the chat that they lost the previous chats, and so did I. I suggest at the end of the call, if you want to, you can go to the bottom of the little chat window. There's 3 little dots, and click on Save Chat. And I'm curious to see if it remembers the whole chat from before as well. I'll be trying that to see if it works for me. But I noticed the same thing happened to me. I've never noticed that before. And go ahead, Zohar. Love to hear your voice.
Hi. So I wanted to put a spotlight on something that I found when I was, and still as I'm checking in how I deal with my authority duty. And I feel like so many times, and I imagine that it will be a shared experience, that when we're in authority, we're lost because we don't know what to do there. So if I'll ask my daughter to do something and she won't do it, I will immediately have this sense of, oh, what should I do? What does it say about me if she doesn't want to do what I say? And then I think if I'm in this state of mind, it really takes the whole scene to somewhere where I don't want to go. But if I can keep myself safe and just remember that if she says no, it doesn't say anything about me. It just says something about her, that she probably has a need now that is very urgent for her to meet that need, or that I will meet that need. And it's not aligned with what I was asking.
Yeah.
So if I give myself this space and this safe container for myself to be there in this role of authority, to always see her and her needs, and that it doesn't say anything about me, then the whole dialogue is so different.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
That's such a profound insight, Zohar. I'm really enjoying hearing it. And it reminds me of another certified trainer, Doug Dulstead, up in the Pacific Northwest. Many years ago, he came up with, they do a lot of family camps, so a lot of things involving NVC and kids. And so there's lots of plays and skits and these kinds of activities to play with NVC rather than to try to teach NVC, to try to live NVC and be NVC. And the kids came up with a chant, and the chant was, it's not about me. It is about needs. It's not about me. It is about needs. Because it's the same thing for your kid. If you got mad at her, it's not about her, it's about your needs. And vice versa. It's always the case that needs are in play. And the more we get connected to needs and speaking a language of needs and thinking in a language of feelings and needs, the more likely we are to contact the creativity to collaborate and solve these problems, solve these puzzles. Even reframing from a problem to a puzzle is a wonderful step, especially with kids. So one thing, if I had a big do-over to do with my kids, we had our kids before NVC, but we're using something similar called parental effectiveness training, which is basically NVC without needs. If you want to just learn PET and then add needs, you've got a fantastic parenting tool. But my do-over would be to slow things down and do more collaboration with my kids. But my inner patriarch, my inner dominator, as much as I wanted to be a warm, loving, connecting parent, every once in a while I would have this little, it's almost like a virus that would become reactivated in my body, and it was like a domination virus. And I'd suddenly think that it was the only choice was to make my kids do the dishes, or to make my kid go out and clean the dog pen, or whatever the chore was. And so I thought that dog pens or dishes were more important than the connection, and that's because I was needing empathy for how hard it is to be a parent or a teacher or anybody with authority, a referee. Anybody in authority just needs tons and tons of empathy for what it's like to be the one that's taken on the responsibility for being the one to facilitate. Basically, referees, teachers, and parents are all facilitators. Facilitate means to make life easy. And yet we end up needing empathy because it's not easy to make life easy for other people sometimes. So thank you, Zohar.
yeah, thank you.
Got time for one more sharing, if anybody, before we do the end of the meeting stuff. Love to hear a voice that hasn't been heard yet, especially if you were here for the first time. I know there were a few people here for the very first time. Okay, Mary, go ahead, Mary.
Jim, I'm really touched by your own journey of NVC. I have a question. How are your kids doing now?
Well, how are you is always a complicated question, but I got to say I'm full of celebration. Jaya, who many of you have met because she works with Sarah Payton, another NVC trainer, who offers a lot of beautiful NVC-based work on, and so Jaya is actively involved with Sarah, and Jaya lives with us. So we have I have this fantastic opportunity to live with my adult child, and we have created such a friendship. And we've really done a lot of work in our relationship to transcend power and to create a power with situation. And it's very creative, and I really enjoy our relationship. And our son, Jiva, is a nonviolence worker. He works for a nonprofit organization that works on racial justice issues. I think it's called Equal Justice USA. And they work with trying to eliminate the death penalty and creating restorative systems rather than punitive systems. And so I couldn't be happier with how they're showing up in the world. We knew that we were very privileged and gifted to have them come and live with us, and we told them that every day. Every day before they went to bed, we would give them a hug and a kiss, read them a story, and tell them we're really glad you came to live with us. And it's true. We were. It wasn't easy being a parent. It's the hardest thing I ever did, but it was certainly very meaningful, and it's really fun to see the fruit of their labor. I don't think I had a whole much to do with it, other than planting seeds and loving them as best as I could. But I really like how they have how they're showing up in the world now. Does that answer your question, Mary? Anything you want to say about it?
Oh, wow. I'm really inspired by that. Actually, today in a small group, I was asking my partner a question. It's a big question. Maybe we can discuss next time. My biggest question is how to help the adult kids to get healed from their own wounds by a parent, by a abusive parent.
Yeah.
Right? I realize the adult children, I can see their pain, their change. I don't know how to help them.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great question, and I love the question, and I hold it with you. And I would say that the essence of the answer is empathy. You know, to create empathic systems, to hold the next generation, and to hold ourselves, to mourn what has happened to us and the impacts that it has had on us, and to do the hard work of first building a life-serving system within ourselves, through self-empathy, self-compassion, self-connection, then to extend those skills into building life-serving system of relationship, first with your primary relationships with your parents and your children and so forth, and then extending that same intention to live compassionately in relationship with every relation, all of our relations. And then from that, naturally, we will begin to build systems that are more life-serving. And it's a big project. Maybe it's a 500-year project or a 1,000-year project, or maybe we'll get really smarter faster and figure out how to become more effective and efficient. I think we need to. That's why I've spent my last 20 years working with NVC, because I think it's the conveyor belt to really support social change. And so that's why I want to get as many people on this conveyor belt as possible. So I'm really glad you're here, Mary, and glad that you're thinking about it. And I saw thumbs up for your question. So thanks for asking it.
Thank you, thank you. It's really hard, really hard.
Yeah.
And but it's a task we really need to do, to cut that family chain.
Yes.
To change it, right?
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I would really need more help, practical help.
Yeah, we do. That's I'll be eternally grateful for my father, who broke the chain of violence in our family. I don't know how he did it, because he certainly didn't have any empathic support, but he never, ever hit me. And I don't think that was true for how he was raised, or how his parents were raised, or how their parents were raised. I think that throughout our ancestral history, there was a lot of corporal punishment, a lot of spanking. And my dad, somehow he broke the chain, probably because of my mother's influence. But somehow they did it. They didn't use punishment. And I managed to avoid it almost all the time in school. I did get hit once in school, but I was a very nice boy, so I didn't get hit very often. Okay, so today, just to sum up, we focused on,
Thank you.
You're welcome. We focused on undoing domination as a part of how to build healthier relationships. And I'm really glad for your participation. Never taught this in this way before. And I learned a lot from your feedback, and I like what happened. And next week, we'll turn it around. We'll do the other part. We'll start undoing submission, which is the other part of the other side of the coin that perpetuates a domination system. Is you can't have dominators without submitters. And so what can we do to stop submitting? And so we'll work on that next week with a couple of other exercises. And if you're here for the first time and want to join our email list, I'll put the link in the chat here, or if you want to send it to friends and invite them to come, all are welcome here. No previous NVC experience is necessary. And if you want to get access to the recordings from the call, you can follow this link. And that goes either to our website, pathwaystoliberation.com, where there's all kinds of stuff, handouts and recordings and lots of support for your NVC learning. I wrote a book year before last called Pathways to Nonviolent Communication. You can find more information about it at Puddle Dancer Press. And you can order it at anywhere books are sold. And you can probably get it shipped for you for free. Pathways to Nonviolent Communication is the name of it. And if you want to donate money to support our NVC work, there's two ways you can do it. You can use PayPal and send the money directly to Jim and Jory, and we'll pay it forward to an NVC project that we're working with at the moment. Or you can donate money directly to Marshall Rosenberg's organization, the Center for Nonviolent Communication. Or alternatively, give it away to a local organization. If you'd like to offer $20 for today's practice group to your local trainer or local nonviolence organization or anything like that, just drop us a line. Let us know that you did it. We'll celebrate it just as much as if you sent the money to us. We just want to give you the opportunity to feed your need for contribution. Now you have some homework to do this week, because my intuition is that the cure for domination is to enjoy the success of other people. And the German word for that is called Freudenfreude. In Sanskrit or Pali, it's mudita. And so there's an article about it in the New York Times. That's a free article that you can read from the New York Times about Freudenfreude and how good it is for us. So my hope is that you'll find at least one opportunity to practice Freudenfreude over the next week, and then come prepared to share about it and share what it's like for you to celebrate somebody else's success. And with that, we're done for today. If you'd like to stick around for the after party, we'll make a small group for you to hang out. Usually a half a dozen or so people stay, and I'd love to have you be here for that. Otherwise, we'll see you next week. Aloha, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. It was
Bye.
wonderful.
Bye. See you next time.
Bye.
Jim,
Yeah, Zohar.
yeah, I wanted to ask you, it just since a while now, because I wanted to send a donation, and you gave me what's the name of this app? The Venmo.
Venmo, yeah.
So you gave Yeah, you gave me your Venmo address and I tried, but I didn't have your phone number to confirm it. And
Oh,
then
okay.
it told me that I couldn't do it.
Okay.
Um,
So I'll give you my phone number. It's let me turn the recording off here.